Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going on a little journey. We're going to follow a single web request as it zips across the entire planet, all thanks to one of the internet's heavy hitters, AWS CloudFront.
So it really all boils down to this one question, right? It almost feels like it breaks the laws of physics. How is it that a website hosted, say, in Virginia, can load in what feels like the blink of an eye for someone all the way over in Tokyo? Well, it's not magic, I promise. It's something called a Content Delivery Network, or CDN, and it's absolutely brilliant.
Okay, so before we jump into the solution, we got to talk about the problem. And the big, bad villain of our story is latency. You know, it's easy to forget, but the internet is actually a physical thing. We're talking real, tangible cables crisscrossing oceans and continents, and data has to travel through all that. So it's simple, really. The farther away you are from a server, the laggier and slower your experience is going to be.
And you can really see the difference right here. On the left, you've got the old school way, a direct connection. That's your user in Tokyo trying to talk to your server in Virginia. We're talking high latency, tons of internet hops. It's just a slow, frustrating wait. But then look at the right, a CDN connection. It completely changes the game by basically shrinking the internet for your user.
And that, my friends, is exactly where AWS CloudFront steps in. Think of it as this huge, global network built specifically to solve this distance problem. It's like a high-speed private highway that sits right on top of the regular, clunky public internet. So let's meet the main characters in this whole operation.
So who are the key players in our little drama? First up, you've got the user. That's our person in Tokyo trying to see your site. Then you have the origin. This is your main server, let's say it's in Virginia. It's the source of truth, holding the one true copy of your website. And finally, the magic ingredient, the edge locations. These are hundreds of data centers scattered all over the globe, acting like little local libraries for your website's content.
All right, let's talk about the best case scenario. This is what we call the happy path, or a perfect cache hit. This is the secret to that lightning fast feeling.
Okay, so our user in Tokyo wants to see your company's logo. Now, their request doesn't take that long trip all the way to Virginia. Nope. Instead, it gets smartly routed to the closest AWS edge location, one that's right there in Tokyo. That local spot checks its storage, its cache, finds a copy of logo.png, and boom, it sends it right back. That's a cache hit, and it happens in a flash.
But what happens if that file isn't there? What if that local edge location doesn't have what the user is asking for? Well, this is where things get really clever.
So when a file isn't found locally, that's called a cache miss. And this is where we get to see the real power behind CloudFront's whole setup, its intelligent, multi-layered design.
Our journey of a miss starts right here, at that first edge location. This is the front line, you know? The first place every request goes. And there are over 400 of these things all over the world, and pretty much every major city you can think of, just trying to be as close to your users as possible. But this time, it's a miss. So where does the request go next?
You might think it goes straight back to the main server, but it doesn't. Instead, it checks with a bigger, more powerful layer called a regional edge cache, or an REC. The best way to think about it is like a regional distribution warehouse. It's bigger, it serves a whole bunch of those smaller edge locations, and it can hold on to way more content for a lot longer.
Okay, so what if the file isn't even in that big regional cache? Well, there's one more optional layer of defense you can put in place, the origin shield. This thing is like a mega cache that sits right in front of your main server. Its job is basically to be a bouncer for your origin. Imagine 100 different caches all over the world need the same file at the same time. Instead of 100 requests slamming your server, Origin Shield steps in and makes sure only one request gets through. It's a huge deal for protecting your server.
So let's trace that whole path again. The request first misses at the local Tokyo edge location. Then it goes up to the regional edge cache, still no dice. Next, it checks the origin shield. And only then, after exhausting all its other options, does it finally go and fetch the file from the main origin server. But here's the really cool part. As that file travels back to our user in Tokyo, it drops off a copy of itself at each layer it passes through. So the origin shield gets a copy, the regional cache gets a copy, and the local edge location gets a copy. That way, the very next person who asks for it gets that perfect, super fast cache hit.
Okay, so now we get the physical journey, which is awesome. We know the path, but how do you actually control all of this? Like what gets saved in the cache and for how long? Well, that brings us to the rules of the game. Really, it all boils down to this thing called the cache key. By default, it's super simple. It's just the URL of the file. One URL, one entry in the cache. Easy. But you can make it more specific.
And that's where you can get into trouble. Just look at the example on the right. If you add something unique for every user, like a session ID, to that cache key, well, you've just walked right into what we call the hit ratio trap. Because now, every single user's request looks unique to the cache. And if every request is unique, nothing can ever be shared. Every single request becomes a miss. You've basically turned off your CDN.
Next up is something called time to live, or TTL. You can just think of this as an expiration date. It's a timer you set that tells CloudFront how long it should consider a file in its cache to be fresh. So for the first 24 hours in this example, it's fresh, it's good to go, serve it up. But once that timer runs out, the file becomes stale. Now that doesn't mean it gets deleted. It just means the next time someone asks for it, CloudFront will do a super quick check back with the origin server to ask, hey, has this changed? Got a new version from it?
But what if you can't wait for the TTL to expire? What if you need to force an update, like right now? Well, you can do something called an invalidation. It basically tells every cache everywhere to delete their copy of a file. But, and this is a big but, look at the cost. It can add up fast. So here's the real pro tip, the thing that will save you a ton of headache and money. Just use versioning. Instead of invalidating logo.png, just upload a new file called logo_v2.png and update your website to point to that. It's free, it's instant, and it's way, way simpler.
All right, we've gone through the architecture, we've gone through the rules. Now let's put it all together and look at how this stuff actually plays out in the real world. Okay, scenario number 1. This is a super common one. Your website is available in a few different languages. You need to make sure that a user from France gets the French text and a user from Spain gets the Spanish text, even though they're both going to the exact same URL. How do you pull that off?
The solution is actually really elegant. You just configure CloudFront to include the user's language header as part of the cache key. So now the key isn't just the URL, it's the URL plus the language. So you end up with separate cached versions, one for the request with the French header and a totally different one for the request with the Spanish header. Problem solved. It's that simple.
Okay, here's another classic problem. Your site is getting really popular. You've set a nice, long TTL, but your main server is still getting absolutely hammered with requests. This usually happens right when you release new content, and all the caches around the world are warming up at the same time. So, what can you do? And the answer takes us right back to that architecture we talked about. You enable Origin Shield. This is precisely the scenario it was built for. It acts as that final guardian for your server, taking what could be thousands of requests from all those warming caches and consolidating them down into just a single request to your origin. It's a lifesaver for your server's health.
Finally, let's talk about the classic trade-off: performance versus cost. CloudFront gives you a way to manage this with something called price classes. It's pretty straightforward. If most of your users are in, say, North America and Europe, you can choose Price Class 100. You'll save some money because you won't be using the more expensive edge locations in other parts of the world. But if you need that top-tier, blazing fast performance for every single person on the planet, you pick Price Class All. It really just puts you in the driver's seat to balance your budget with your performance goals.
And that really just leaves us with one last thought to chew on. Your audience today can be anywhere, absolutely anywhere. So now that you've seen the entire journey your request takes, from their screen to your server and back, the real question is your delivery strategy truly built for them? Is it giving them the best possible experience? Something to think about. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today.